Hello and welcome to the Power Hour podcast. I'm your host, Scott Barrett. Alongside me, as always, is my attorney and co-host, John Proctor. If you're a fan of the show, you know we do a DFS podcast every week during the regular season. Because it's June and we're bored, we're doing a special series on MFL10s, which are $10 to $100 best ball leagues, hosted on myfantasyleague.com. First, we had Josh Lake on to talk quarterbacks. Then we had Graham Barfield on to talk running backs. Today, we have Rumford Johnny on to talk MFL10 tight ends. Rummy is a close personal friend of mine and one of my favorite dudes in the industry. He's a really talented and hilarious writer. You can find some of his non-fantasy work at Bro Jackson. He's a sharp DFS mind as well. I was constantly in his DMs last year trying to figure out what to do with the Patriots offense. The now defunct Rummy and Ray podcast was also a big inspiration for this podcast, and one me and my co-host listen to religiously. You may also remember him from the Two Mugs podcast. He's personally been a big help to me in the industry. I think something like 40% of all of my followers have come from like 2 tweets from him. He's now working as a consultant with Denny Carter's Draft Day Consultants, Inc., and he'll be participating in the upcoming Pros vs. Joes Challenge. Rummy, how's it going?
That was a very long, drawn-out intro. Thank you so much, sir. By the way, if this is an inspiration, the Rummy and Ray podcast was an inspiration for this podcast, and it's guaranteed to be done in 1 year. So that's great.
Oh, God.
Unfortunately, But yeah, I had a blast doing that with Ray Summerlin, who's now obviously working full-time for Roto World, and we had a blast doing that because we did a little something different with DFS. I know you guys are kind of going to be going down that road too in a month or so and hitting DFS hard, which we all are. I mean, I'm excited. We want to make money. I mean, I know Scott's got an apartment right now with like a bunch of milk crates and shit. He wants to put some furniture in that bitch, so you're going to have to like make some DFS money to do that. So.
Yeah, if you didn't catch that reference, I just moved into a new apartment, and I'm literally podcasting from a laptop on an overturned garbage can because I'm too cheap to buy a table for my living room.
Yeah, so people know he actually wrestled that can because it was filled with trash and was burning from a couple of homeless guys who were just trying to stay warm, and now it's basically his podcast seat. So.
Yeah, by the way, please someone sponsor this. Yeah, I don't want to be living in filth for the rest of my life.
Exactly.
All right, you ready to talk tight ends strategy?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about 2015, man, which was my original strategy for MFL10s was basically this, guys. I had no strategy. I was in a dozen MFL10s last year, which is small by most numbers. I think that's pretty much like the average for people that are just starting out in MFL10s. And for people that don't know, obviously MFL10s are best ball leagues. You draft, a bigger roster, and then you kind of forget about it, and then you check back, in December to see how you did. I basically, had no strategy. I was going in with some leagues with, 2 tight ends, some leagues 3 tight ends, some leagues 4 tight ends. I was getting tight ends early, getting tight ends late. And obviously the strategy was decent for some of my leagues because I won 3 out of 12, which is a decent hit rate, even though it's a small amount of leagues. Winning, 25% of your leagues is okay. I obviously want to do much better this year, so I won't be throwing shit against the wall like I did last year and hoping it sticks. Last year, obviously, getting Jordan Reed in the 10th round was huge, and that was the guy that if you waited on tight end and you grabbed him and say, got Ben Watson really, really late. I think Ben Watson I got like the 20th round. And those are the leagues that I ended up winning, strangely enough, because I just had really solid tight end, output every week and a decent baseline if I had those guys on my roster. The leagues I didn't win, honestly, were the ones where I grabbed Gronk early because a lot of times on the turn you get Gronk and, somebody like Marshawn Lynch who, got hurt and underperformed, obviously, and that kind of screwed you, really, because the numbers just weren't there. for the investment that you made early for tight end. So that, I mean, of course, that's cyclical. It can change this year with the Brady situation, who could potentially be out for another 4 games to start the season. That obviously hurts Gronk a lot. We have Martellus Bennett in the mix, so that kind of makes maybe some of the red zone production is extracted from Gronk a little bit in that situation. So obviously could help too that he has another big target in the red zone to kind of take away some of the heat. But still, all in all, I don't know that he'll be worth where he's being drafted because he's still being taken early in MFL10s. I've got, honestly, like out of 17 leagues, I probably have only 1 share of Gronk, just because I didn't want to completely, punt on Gronk, and I wanted to have at least a share or 2, and I might take him one more time, especially if his ADP drops a little bit. But that's kind of where I was last year. So I learned a lot from it, and I think this year I'm kind of looking to grab tight ends starting around the 8th to 10th round. I want to get a first tight end, and then a little bit later, maybe in the 11th to 13th round, I want to get my second tight end. You can kind of throw some darts a little bit later, in 13 to 15. You can grab your third tight end. I usually like to have 3, but that's kind of where I've moved this year. Like, not getting too crazy. The leagues where I was terrible is when I took tight end really late, like 15, 16, 17, like right before my defenses, and those were all garbage. I mean, you just get a lot of guys from the Ravens, and just like the second, third tight end guys who just don't really produce week to week. The reality is that you need to look at tight ends who are going to be either the 1A or 1B in an offense, or at very least the number 2. Be behind that, and that's where you're going to really get value, because they're going to be getting a lot of targets, and obviously red zone production is so key for MFL10s. I mean, there are a lot of guys who potentially won't be seeing 100+ targets, but if they're seeing 70 or so targets and they score 8 to 10 touchdowns, they're still really valuable because their value is so concentrated in terms of red zone production.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting what you're saying about Gronk, like how all your Gronk teams didn't really pan out too well. I absolutely destroyed the tight end position. I know I definitely got lucky, but I just did really well. My most owned tight ends in order were Tyler Eifert, Jordan Reed, and then Jason Marrow. Marrow hurt a little bit.
Man.
But the first 2 definitely carried me. I think I also had Delaney really high, like maybe 5th or 6th. But oddly enough, I only had 8 Gronk shares, but I think I won 3 or 4 of those Gronk teams somehow.
Wow.
I might have just got lucky, but.
Well, yeah. Go ahead, John.
Just an interesting tidbit, just to plug Mike Beers here at Beerswater. He pulled all the teams from last year, and he found that the highest performing teams last year only got 22% of their flex position points from the tight end. So it just kind of shows you how little value the tight end is compared to wide receivers. So it makes sense that a guy like Gronk, even though he's way ahead of the other tight ends, he's really not providing you that flex value like a wide receiver that you're getting in that area.
So yeah, let's jump right into player analysis with the first tight end off the board in terms of ADP, and that's Rob Gronkowski. I think the obvious benefit, he's going in the late first right now, mid to late first. I think the obvious benefit with him is you just draft Gronk and then maybe a tight end in the 13th, 14th round, like Charles Clay, someone like that, and just be done with the position, giving yourself an extra bullet to fire off at a third defense or a third QB or an extra wide receiver. We had some really interesting conversations last year, Rummy, about Gronk, how he kind of started to slip towards the second half. Maybe he was being asked to block more with the New England offensive line struggling. I'm really, really interested to hear what you think about Gronk and what kind of role, if any, Martellus Bennett plays in his decline, or if he's going to be more efficient this year. What do you think, Rummy?
Yeah, I think actually he does help some, but he also, again, he's going to pull away some of those red zone targets from Gronk. He helps because in reality, this offense was most effective when they had two tight ends, when they had Hernandez and Gronkowski, and Hernandez out of the slot position. And actually, Gronk played some slot too, believe it or not, in the red zone when they had both tight ends in that offense. So it's going to sort of help a little bit, but it's also going to hurt a little bit. I think where it helps is in the red zone. You're not going to see two guys covering Gronk anymore. You're going to see more people having to focus a little bit on Bennett, obviously, is a huge target. And you still got guys in the slot. You still got, Edelman. You're still going to have Dion Lewis, who are going to get some looks as well in the red zone. So it certainly helps. I think it kind of balances out a little bit. I'm actually going to be watching closely on Gronk's ADP. I think him missing, OTAs, which is really not a big deal, but I've already seen somewhat of a dip already in where he's being drafted. So, if that continues, we continue to see, potentially Bennett sort of shine in camp and start to sort of ascend a little bit in ADP. That's going to help Gronk a little bit, because I'd rather have Gronk, somewhere in the middle of the second round. It's never going to happen, probably this year. But if he starts to fall towards, the top or the middle of the second round, then I'm all in. Right now, he's still very, very early. I've seen as early as like 1/6, generally to like the turn of the first round. So, and that's too rich for me. I think there are other wide receivers at that point that I like to have more so than Gronk, and I think there's linear value in some guys we had talked about just now with who are on that same level as Gronk or close to that same level that can certainly provide enough points for you. Jordan Reed's another option, obviously, even though he's a little bit of he's going to get a bump this year. He's going fifth or sixth round now, and that's kind of it's a pretty big leap from last year. But he's still relatively cheap when you compare where Gronk is going in most ADPs.
Yeah, and you're definitely right on Gronk. He has dropped in the last 2 weeks or so. He's kind of made his way to like pick 12, where he started around pick 10.
Mm-hmm.
That was a nice segue into Jordan Reed, who led the league in fantasy points per game at the tight end position last year. His current ADP is late third, early fourth at 36 overall. Obviously, he's an awesome talent. I had a ton of shares last year, a lot where I also had to handcuff Niles Paul when it was early on in the season. Great talent, but the injury risk is definitely a big concern with the concussions and other injuries. Do you think he's a good value at that spot right there?
I mean, I think he's still a good value. I mean, where he's being drafted, it's not a huge leap from last year. It's still a considerable leap. But I think that when you look at that offense, the way it's shaping up now, he's still going to be. I still think he's going to be the number one target. There's still guys who are, who have issues with injuries as well in that offense. And I think he's certainly somebody that could continue to see a lion's share of the target. So I'm concerned about his health. But if we go into every draft worrying about a guy with injuries, you're never going to draft him. You're always going to pivot, and especially when their ADP climbs a little bit. But when you consider where he is right now, still at a reasonable price, I'm buying shares now. I get worried like in a couple of weeks when we start to hear all the positive buzz out of camp, and then he'll start climbing, a few rounds higher. Then I'm usually moving away, but still super manageable in terms of ADP.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Reed and Gronk both just kind of scare me, because I think I have just very few shares of each. It's like whenever I have a team that I draft one of those two guys, I just hate the team. It just seems like I miss out on one of those elite scorers at the running back or wide receiver position, and it just like I really hate the team, and I think that just keeps me from drafting them as I go forward. But I would agree that I think that you should have a few shares of those guys because their ceiling is just so high.
Yeah.
Honestly, my favorite teams so far are the teams where I draft only two tight ends. Sometimes it'll be like Colby Fleener and Julius Thomas as my two tight ends, or sometimes it'll be Reed and Charles Clay or something like that. But definitely, I really like the two tight end start. What about and you can definitely afford to do that with Reed, or maybe you can't because of his injury history. Not too sure, but I feel comfortable doing it with the next tight end off the board, Greg Olsen. There's some concern about Calvin Benjamin coming back, taking away targets, but I still feel fairly confident he's going to lead the team in targets this year. What do you think, Rummy?
Yeah, I agree. I think he will. I think just having more weapons, and especially having like somebody like Funchess who's getting positive buzz in the mix, with a little bit more development under his belt, I think that helps somebody like Olsen. It's not going to hurt him. Anytime you have other targets who can take away some of the attention from the tight end who's considered the number one target, then obviously it's going to help him. I just never been a big Greg Olsen guy. I don't invest a ton into Greg Olsen. I just don't see a huge ceiling for that offense. I will say this, though. I think that this situation without Norman in the mix, I think that really does hurt them quite a bit on defense. I think that you're going to see them probably in games where they end up being scored on a lot more this year, and that's going to really kind of create more opportunity for more scoring opportunities for this offense. So I do think that helps a little bit. So I've never been a really big Greg Olsen guy. I can't tell you why, but I think you're kind of talking me into it now that I'm thinking about how this potential for this offense to have to score more points this year could probably be a net positive for somebody like Olsen.
Yeah, Greg Olsen is also one of the guys who I don't have any reason why I'm not drafting him. I just don't really seem to end up with him. I think one thing, that passing game kind of played out of its mind last year a little bit, and I, as much as I think Olsen will probably still lead his team in targets, which I agree with Scott there, I still don't think he's going to see quite as much work in the red zone when you've also got another 8-foot-tall wide receiver who's sort of almost a tight end who's going to be taking some targets away from him. And I'm going to go down narrative street, though Scott has argued this one with me over the last 2 weeks. But there's a video with Cam on a talk show where he's talking about Calvin Benjamin and plays that he calls out for Benjamin and these types of things. And Benjamin didn't even play with them last year, and he spent 4 minutes talking about how him and Benji interact at the line. And I just think that kind of shows that Benjamin's still going to be really involved in the offense, and he hurts Greg Olsen.
Yeah, that's totally narrative street, man. Nice, I like that. No, I'm with you, man. I buy into some of that stuff too. I think those are all parts of the puzzle, and when there's chemistry, and I know this gets shit on a lot amongst people on Twitter. When there's chemistry, with the quarterback and wide receiver, you have to kind of buy into some of that. Because it does equate to targets. It does equate to trust. Trust equates to targets. It's something you can't really quantify, but it's true. So, I mean, if he's back and he's doing well and he looks good, certainly I'm buying. And I'm just concerned that his ADP is still kind of high for somebody like Benjamin. Now, in terms of ADP, I haven't really looked because I haven't invested in both of these guys. What are we talking about in terms of Benjamin ADP versus Greg Olsen ADP?
Olsen's going 56 pick overall, and Benjamin is going
34th.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'm fading Benjamin, to be honest.
Yeah. So that's again that's a pretty big dip there, and I mean obviously if Olsen starts to fall a little bit and we get some positive buzz out of camp for Benjamin, then I'm buying Olsen. But I haven't so far. I just never been a big Olsen guy. But I definitely see the appeal there. If you wanted to pivot from Reed to somebody like Olsen, who are probably around that same range, I would imagine, in ADP, very, very, very close to each other, I think I could see pivoting to Olsen, especially if he starts to slip a little bit in ADP.
The next tight end up in terms of ADP is Tyler Eifert. Only on average half a pick away from Travis Kelce, so it is close. He's going the late 6th. Even with the ankle surgery he just had, I'm still a really big fan. The team just lost Sanu and LaFell in free agency. He ranked 5th in fantasy points per game last season. He ranked 3rd in yards per target. He led the league in red zone target conversion rate by a landslide, converting 12 red zone targets for 15 touchdowns. He's probably due for some natural regression in that department, but I'm also not sure that we don't see an increase in red zone targets next season due to how effective he was this season. The injury concern is there. You have that with Reed as well, but I just think he's really an ascending talent and someone who really excels in a best ball format. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I like him. I think that obviously his ADP is right there, right after him. We just talked about Olsen, and he's probably going to continue to slip a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I like him. I like getting him, especially in this format. I think you're right. I think he certainly has that 1A, 1B type of appeal in that offense. I think a lot of hype is going on AJ Green right now, who's really, really climbing in ADP. I saw AJ Green go 4th overall, which I thought was like really pretty surprising in terms of where he'd been going before. So people are all in on AJ Green. There's a lot of push on him right now. So obviously that's going to help Eifert quite a bit. I tend to kind of pivot a little bit in that sense with his situation because I don't really believe in any of the other targets and that offense all that much. And I see somebody like Gio Bernard who's going to catch a lot of passes. So if I'm like going late running back or 0 running back, I'm snatching up Gio because I think he's going to get a lot of targets. They just kind of extend him now, his contract. So he's certainly going to get a little bit more targets in that offense. So I do like his appeal. But, yeah, I'm with you, man. I think Eifert certainly at that ADP, and if he continues to slip, especially with the injury, people are going to get nervous if they don't hear a lot of positive stuff. You're going to probably get him for a song, come July, August.
And even now, if you pull the ADP for Eifert from just June, he's fallen past Kelsey. He's going just about 80th pick overall.
Oh, wow.
I've grabbed him in the 8th round in 2 drafts in the last 2 weeks. And so for me, when Eifert, I was buying him in the 5th, 6th round before the surgery. And now if he falls to the end of the 7th or the 8th, I just kind of auto-click him because he was a guy we kind of expected to miss a game or two. That's kind of the expectation you have when you take him, when you took him even before. So now it's just kind of like he's missing that game or two at the beginning, guaranteed, rather than it being a mystery. So that kind of doesn't really bother me as much as it seems to bother everybody else. And there's also the high likelihood that he might not even miss a game. So I'm buying.
Yeah, at that sliding discount, absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you, man.
Yeah, I agree. And then what's the alternative? Travis Kelce, the next tight end we're going to talk about. In a best ball format, he doesn't really have the kind of ceiling you want to chase. He had just 3 games of 17 fantasy points or more over the last 2 seasons. Maybe losing Doug Peterson changes that, but I don't really see it. What do you think, Rummy?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's about the ceiling, and Kelsey is a nice kind of steady Eddie sort of play, but I mean he doesn't have the high highs which you chase in best ball. I mean you don't have like those phenomenal big games spikes with him. That's really what you're looking for because especially at the tight end position. I mean you're looking for some sort of steady production. The 4 or 5 catches a game, 60 yards or so. If you get guys like that, you're great. But you also want those guys who have that ceiling that can get you, 100 yards, 8 catches, and 2 touchdowns. There are some guys who can do that and have those high highs. I don't know that he always has that ceiling in this offense. So that's the other part of the equation where this is sort of such a low key, not a high volume offense. That's sort of going to take him out of that equation. They just don't use him to the maximum effort that they could. They don't use him like a Gronk, in New England. They don't use him, like Jordan Reed with a lot of stuff underneath, the high volume stuff. So he's going to win in PPR as well. So he just doesn't have that ceiling, and that's tough. So, but he's in that spot where a lot of other people are going to be taking him over somebody like Eifert.
Yeah, and if you do want to chase a floor in this format, I think the guy you take is the guy who's next up in ADP, Delaney Walker. Last season, he finished as a top 12 tight end in 80% of his games. That was tied for most at the position with Rob Gronkowski He led the team in red zone targets and targets inside the 10-yard line and converted at least 75% of those into catches. When his tight end coach, Mike Mularkey, took over as head coach in Week 9, Walker ranked first among tight ends in fantasy points. And then actually, if you just look among all receivers, so wide receivers, running back, and tight ends, in fantasy points from Week 9 on, he ranked 8th overall. He was a monster, a guy that me and Johnny were recommending every single week in DFS. And I feel like there's a good chance that continues with Mike Mularkey being extended as the head coach for this season. I know they want to run the ball a lot, but I still think, and they added some weapons, but I still think Walker is easily going to lead the team in targets again this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people, too, are sort of like thumbing their nose at Walker because of the addition of all these weapons, because they don't also have a lot of trust in this offense, because of the, air quotes, exotic smash mouth promise. I mean, they're still going to be terrible on defense. They're still going to allow a lot of points. They're still going to have to throw. We know Mariota can get it done with his feet. I think he's going to get better this year, too, as a passer. And I think he's going to always lean on his banking. I think that's who Walker is, and he's going to look for him a lot. So while the targets may regress, I still think he's still going to be a value where he's being drafted. So I don't really I can't see any negative with him. I think unless his ADP starts climbing drastically, which I don't see happening, I'm still buying. I don't have a ton of shares right now, but I have enough shares where I've been able to wait a little bit and get him in that sweet spot that we were talking about in the middle round. So,
yeah, that's the other point too. Is that they scored the 8th fewest offensive touchdowns last season. That's definitely going to improve, and Walker should be the main beneficiary, in my opinion.
And that's the one big thing with Walker is, like everybody says, his targets are going to regress, which is totally fine. I mean, 130 targets for a tight end is a lot. The thing is that his efficiency was not all that great last year. So I think it seems in line that a rookie quarterback playing for the first time ever with his tight end, his new tight end on a new NFL team is going to be better next year, and I think that's going to make Walker also better. So even if the targets regress a little bit, I think he can build on the 6 touchdowns that he had. I mean, he's really, unless this unicorn talent, Dorial Green-Beckham, who somehow is going to turn into the next Josh Gordon, scores all the touchdowns in the red zone, I think Walker is a good bet to increase on the 6 touchdowns, which is going to be a big boost for him.
All right, the guy I want to talk about next, who's next up in ADP, Johnny knows I'm obsessed with. The guy, easily my most owned tight end, is Coby Fleener. I've been targeting him for a while. His ADP is finally starting to catch up with where he belongs. I have him in my rankings as tight end 5. He's currently going tight end 7. I'm just in love. Over the last 2 seasons, he's averaged 18.8 fantasy points per game in games Dwayne Allen didn't play. Over the last 8 seasons as a team, the Saints have ranked inside the top 6 in fantasy points scored by tight ends every season except for one, when they finished 12th. That's including Jimmy Graham's rookie year when he only caught 31 passes. That's including 2 seasons where Jeremy Shockey led the team in tight end targets. That's including last season when Ben Watson finished as the overall fantasy tight end 7 at 35 years of age. They're going to use him exactly as how they used Jimmy Graham. They're not going to ask him to block. He's just going to run routes, and he's going to score touchdowns, and I'm going to profit heavily. What do you think, Remy?
I'm not as big a fan of I'll tell you, man, I have a hard time when a guy who's essentially playing with his college quarterback in Indianapolis can't get on the same page with his quarterback, and he then goes to Dwayne Allen, who I believe is a pretty average talent. And I like Dwayne Allen, but I think he's a really average tight end. And he really can't get on the same page. And actually, Jack Doyle was getting more red zone targets at one point than Coby Fleener. So he gets paid a ton of money by the Saints. He falls into a perfect storm system for the tight end. Everybody's on board. The ADP rises, like the tide. I'm not buying it, man. I just don't. I'd rather walk away and say, It's like everybody else driving up the price, of a shitty car. It's like why am I gonna pay for that? I'm gonna go to the other dealership and get something cheaper and more reliable. But yeah, so I'm just not buying it. I think Fleener is somebody that is, in that division. It's going to be a little bit easier for him now in this division, but it's certainly a tough division for tight ends. I don't know that he's the type of tight end that's going to necessarily make the best of his situation, even though it should be on paper. I just don't think he's very good. I think he's kind of a soft tight end. I don't think he's very physical. I don't think that, in the red zone, I think this is a team that's going to sort of shift a little bit to some of the smaller guys, the run after the catch type of offense, and I don't see Fleener getting this huge boost. Not to say that I'm going after Josh Hill in round 20 or anything like that, but I just don't see it. I think this is going to be a real, dink and dunk, run after the catch type offense this year. It's going to be a high volume, high snap situation, and I'm just not buying him at his price right now because it's continuing to climb. Not that if he fell, say 3-4 rounds, I would buy, but I'm not buying him right now because he just steadily keeps climbing for me.
I think that was the best thing about Fleener was that right when he went to the Saints, nobody wanted him, and you could get him 110th overall type pick.
Yeah.
So I know Scott and I loaded up on him around then, and he's definitely climbed, and it's hard to take him over Delaney Walker, I think.
Yeah.
But he's the prime example of whether or not you're a believer in opportunity over talent, and I think Fleener sucks. I have always long thought Fleener sucks. I think he's scared of contact. I think he struggles in the red zone. But I'm not really buying this guy for TDs. I think he's kind of like a PPR dynamo. He's got some run after the catch ability, and I think if he gets that 80 to 100 target range, then I think he kind of fills your tight end slot, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But he is scary as a talent because I don't think he's very good.
Now, where's his ADP as it stands right now? Is it continuing to climb or is it leveled off?
It's climbed. He's going 81st pick overall as of June.
Okay. Yeah, if it starts getting into that area where we were talking about, above Eifert and some of those other guys, and I'm just man, just let somebody else take him,
Yeah, he's actually going half a pick earlier than Delaney Walker at this point.
Oh, man. Fuck that.
Scott, Delaney Walker or Kobe Fleener?
It's definitely close. I'd have to double-check my rankings. I'm not sure. I do know it is close. What about the next tight end off the board while I pull up my rankings? That is Zachary Ertz, who averaged over 21 points per game over the final month of the season. Peterson signed him to a big contract his first week with the Eagles. What do you guys think on Zach Ertz?
I don't care about Zach Ertz. You guys can talk him up if you want to.
Here's my thoughts on Zach Ertz. If Nelson Aguilar has some shit going down right now, Ruben Randall is not very good. Jordan Matthews seems to be struggling to play on the outside. Someone is going to have to catch the ball in that offense. They're obviously not going to throw as much as they did last year. They're not going to run as many snaps as they did last year. But I think Zach Ertz playing a Travis Kelce role, I imagine that he is probably going to get a similar type of workload as Kelce, and he's going, 30 picks later. I'll take the discounted Travis Kelce. I'm not super high on him, but I'm buying when he falls.
Yeah, I just pulled up my rankings. I do have Fleener slightly above Delaney Walker, but they're right next to each other. Then I have Kelce 7th, so I am definitely down on him. I have Ertz right behind Kelce, and I wouldn't be too shocked if Ertz outscored Kelce this season. Ertz the past few seasons has been a guy who does have a high ceiling but has been very inconsistent. I think the contract from Peterson is kind of a show of faith that he does trust Ertz a lot. I'm worried about Matthews in the slot in this offense. The Kansas City Chiefs last year only went 3 wide, I think like 60% of the time. PFF Neil Hornsby is predicting a decline of 200 snaps this season for Jordan Matthews, not even including pace, just because he doesn't think he can play on the outside. And that's big. Aguilar struggled a lot as a rookie. Maybe that was injury. And then you have this other thing with the rape charge coming up. I think Ertz is going to be relied on pretty heavy, and I don't have too much of a problem taking him at his current ADP, and especially if he falls a little bit. But the guy next up, I think I'd take Ertz. It's really close between them, but I know Johnny is super high on this guy. Johnny, you want to talk up your boy Ladarius Green as the 9th tight end off the board?
So Ladarius Green is somebody who I just started looking into. I actually only have 3 shares of him right now, but he's a guy I'm starting to add. So I looked up his numbers when he was in. He was always pretty good when given the opportunity, and a lot of people thought, he was only good when Antonio Gates missed. But in reality, he was actually pretty good whenever he was on the field and whenever he was given any type of workload. And he was always really, really good in the red zone. And that's something that the Steelers just lost Martavis Bryant. So they have to throw to somebody else in the red zone, and they're a team that's going to score touchdowns. They consistently score lots of touchdowns. They run a high-powered offense, and they are going to have to throw to somebody in the red zone, and he's now their biggest target, unless you are a believer that Sammy Coates is going to somehow be the next Martavis Bryant. So even if Ladarius Green only gets the same workload that Heath Miller got, the 80 to 90, maybe 100 targets, he's going to get more yards than Heath Miller did if he gets the same amount of targets, because he's obviously a better run after the catch guy than Heath Miller was as like a 65-year-old plotter. So I think he's somebody I'm buying just because I think I want a piece of that offense that's cheap and most likely to be better than what its ADP is. So I'm not buying Wheaton, I'm not buying Coates, I'm now buying Green.
Rummy?
Yeah, I'm not as high as Johnny on Green, but I still like him. I mean, obviously that ADP. I have a hard time buying that this isn't really going to be sort of a diversified target situation outside of Antonio Brown in this offense. So I have like a struggle with the fact that he could be this big red zone guy, just because. I really haven't seen a big enough sample size. We all thought he'd break out for a couple of years, and Gates kind of kept him from doing that pretty much because of the trust that Phillip Rivers had in Gates for so long. And Gates is somebody that's going to be going a little bit later. Actually, would rather still have Gates over Green because he's going to be a lot cheaper, even though he may not play as much as somebody like Green this year. But I'm concerned that, again, we're pumping those tires a little bit, but his ADP is so low right now. It's so manageable in comparison to where everybody had him last year, because I think he was pushed up a lot last year, even though he was in a situation, essentially a tight end timeshare, which is rare. He's not in that situation now, so I think people are sort of expecting him to be solid, but I think they're also sort of concerned that he might not blow up in that offense. So it's kept his ADP manageable. I'll have some shares. I'll be honest with you. I haven't had many so far in 17 leagues. I think I probably only have 1 share of Green right now. So, and that might change as a result because he hasn't really moved much.
All right, next up on our list, we have a guy who's just been driving me insane when I've been doing my rankings. We have Gary Barnidge, who's a 30-year-old tight end with 75 career targets prior to last season. He came out of nowhere to finish as the number 4 overall fantasy tight end. He has a new head coach in this offense and a new offense. Hawkins is the only other receiver on the team with at least 40 receptions in a season. He signs a 3-year extension in December. He just had sports hernia surgery. I don't have many shares at all, but I'm thinking that if McCown is named the starter, I might start loading up. In the 8 games McCown played last season, Barnidge averaged 18.3 fantasy points per game. To put that in perspective, Jordan Reed led all tight ends in points per game last season with 17.7. So he was like the #1 tight end with McCown starting. Yeah, I don't know. What are you doing right now at this moment? I'm mostly laying off, but
I don't have a ton of shares. And we did find out recently that he had sports hernia surgery or something.
Yeah.
Which isn't great. I mean, obviously it can sort of hurt your ability to sort of high point and everything else. I mean, just your body movement. He's not like, this guy's obviously a plotter. He wears Steph Curry Under Armour sneakers and stuff. He's slow, but he's made the most of the situation. It's like one of what John talked about, where a guy that you don't really believe in talent wise, but he's had a beautiful situation. So I do think that he'll continue to have those targets. He'll continue to see that. There just isn't a lot of guys there. Corey Coleman's sort of leveled off in terms of ADP. I don't think that Hugh Jackson is really going to put a ton of weight on him initially. I think he's going to draw a lot of attention from defensive backs. So Barnidge is going to be, the big guy still in the offense. So I think if people are scared off of the injury and he starts to fall even more too, that just makes him a little bit more desirable as well. So I have a few shares. I might probably get a few more in a couple of weeks to see, where that ADP goes.
That's why I'm buying Barnidge right now. You can get him in like the 10th round lately. He is just plummeting since everybody saw that he had surgery.
Yeah.
And hernia surgery is like not that big of a deal. It's like you're off for a month or two, and then you're honestly often better off than you were before the hernia surgery. So I'm buying, as people are worried about the surgery. The Browns cut their best wide receiver already in Brian Hartline, so they now no longer have a veteran presence.
Yeah.
So they need a guy who has played football in the NFL before. And he's really the only one that's there. So I think that he will be, at least in the first half of the season, probably one of the most heavily targeted players on that offense. So I'm buying with the surgery panic for sure.
Nice. Check your phone, John.
Taken care of.
Thanks for the injury update there, Johnny. Yeah, Johnny's not a doctor. He's a lawyer, but he deals with a lot of medical stuff.
He plays one on TV, though.
Yeah, you're a personal injury lawyer, right, Johnny?
Workers' comp, personal injury, yeah.
Okay. Nice. So he knows.
So he does.
Listen, let me tell you, as somebody who had hernia surgery, not just like seriously, like I had triple hernia surgery, and it was awful, dude. It sucks for the first couple of weeks. He's right, but you do feel better. Like, much better. Like, after a few weeks, you feel fantastic, and it's a lot better. Because prior to that, I was like sick as a dog, and the first 48 hours sucks. But yeah, it's brutal. Now we've seen other players who've gone through it, and it's like, it depends. I think if it was a running back, I'd be more concerned, because you kind of have to make more cuts and everything, and mobility is a little bit stiff, right away. But he might still be fine. But I think that's good that it keeps his ADP kind of at a manageable level. So.
Yeah, the next tight end we have to talk about is Julius Thomas at tight end 11 overall. He's not a guy I'm really targeting this season, but if I were to own him, it would definitely be in a best ball format. Last season, since he returned from injury in Week 5, here's how the scoring broke down for him on a week-by-week basis. 4 points, 21 points, 1 point by week, 4 points, 4 points, 14 points, 27 points, 10 points, 17 points, 14 points, 3 points, 3 points. He was just like wildly inconsistent last year. He is on an offense that likes to throw a ball a lot, especially in the red zone. But he does have a high level of competition. Allen Robinson, Alan Hearns, who also had sports injury hernia surgery and signed a massive contract, is going to get targets as well. What are you guys doing with Julius Thomas? I definitely don't have too many shares.
No, I like the value, at least where he is right now, and this is kind of where we're heading, guys. We were talking about this before, John. You mentioned this before. We like that sweet spot of like the round 7 to like 9, where we're getting your first tight end off the board. Now we're getting like our second and third guys, and there's like a lot of guys who are linear at this point, where you're going to get that, 100 and anywhere from like 125 to 160 points. In MFL10s, and that's really nice. That's good value at that point if you're waiting. So it's almost like looking at the running back position, but on a sliding scale. Like if I'm going to get an early running back, like maybe in the first 5 rounds, and then I'm going to wait and get a lot of pass catching running backs, maybe later in the middle rounds to late rounds. I'm going to do the same sort of for tight ends. I'm going to grab a tight end maybe in that 7th to 8th round, then I'm kind of waiting that like 4 or 5 rounds later to get tight end 2 and 3.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm on Julius Thomas. As a second tight end, I'm completely fine with him. As everyone thinks that Bortles is going to regress and throw like 13 touchdowns this season instead of what he did last year.
Because the defense is going to become the 85 Bears. You forgot that, man. They're all going to overnight. They're going to be a fucking juggernaut. Let's not forget that.
Yep. So make sure you pick up your defense in MFLs as well. But yeah, I mean they're going to throw in the red zone, so I'm good with him. I think he's a guy that has TD upside, and that's kind of what you're looking for in your late tight ends.
Yep.
And again, really good in a best ball format. Next tight end I know Rummy likes a lot is Antonio Gates. Last season he scored 49 fantasy points through his first 2 games back from suspension, then dealt with injuries throughout most of the rest of the season. Still, he was heavily utilized, even with Ladarius Green there. He ranked 8th among tight ends in targets per game, 6th in yards per game, and 6th in touchdowns per game. He's 35 years old. The team just drafted Hunter Henry. Rummy, you like him a lot, right? You want to talk him up?
Yeah, at this point in your MFL10, I mean, it's a value. We obviously lost Green, so you have that sort of addition by subtraction. He gets a bump in that situation. I think a lot of people are really pushing Keenan Allen right now. I don't know if you guys have noticed that lately. Keenan Allen's got a huge bump. A lot of talk on Twitter, a lot of articles now about how he's being undersold. I like Keenan Allen, but I'm not buying that he's going to be able to still come out there and produce on a full 16-game slate and be the juggernaut that everybody thinks he is. I think that sort of helps Gates' value and keeps it suppressed quite a bit. I think Gates is still going to be a guy that's going to be targeted heavily in the red zone, and I love him. I mean, obviously without the other element of having Green there, he's going to lean on his guy. Phillip Rivers is going to look for his tight end in the red zone. So I like him. I think that's another guy too. Perfect tight end too. Even in some cases, I've been getting him as a tight end 3. So.
Yep, I'm with you. And with Keenan Allen, like I love Keenan Allen, I'm a big Keenan Allen fan, but he's not really a TD scorer. His big selling point is that he's going to get a ton of targets. He's a PPR guy.
Yeah.
So who's going to be the guy in the red zone, and it's going to be Antonio Gates. So even if he doesn't have the same type of targets that he used to have, he's still going to have those touchdowns, and those are again what you're looking for late at tight ends.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Antonio Gates has 28% of Phillip Rivers' career passing touchdowns.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So next up, we have Eric Ebron, ascending young tight end who was drafted really high. The team lost Calvin Johnson. What do you guys think about Eric Ebron?
I like him. I mean, I think he's another guy, too, if you want to go with a steady tight end that we talked about earlier in that 8 to 10 spot, 8th round to 10 round spot, and you get somebody like him, 10th, 11th round, and you want to go for more upside. I think when you look at that offense, that extracting Calvin Johnson sort of leaves it up in the air. I think a lot of attention will be paid to Golden Tate in the offense. I think he's going to be looked at as the number 1 target, obviously. He'll get a lot of defensive attention. But I think that Marvin Jones is kind of being overplayed a little bit. I love Marvin Jones in Cincinnati, but he was really clearly a number 3. Now he's going to be asked to be the number 2. I don't think that he is a number 2 wide receiver. I think that somebody like Ebron, who's going to do a lot of clear-out stuff underneath, potentially could have a really high target season this year. So I like him, especially as a number 2, even number 3 tight end. If you get him later, that's a really nice. He could be I don't want to say he's Jordan Reed. I don't think he is at all. But I think he could have like a Jordan Reed-like, where you pay for him in terms of return, you could certainly get a really nice high investment.
Yeah. See, I'm just kind of buying Marvin Jones and Eric Ebron because the targets. Calvin was not Calvin last year is one of those things, and so the idea that the offense is suddenly going to just completely, fall off because they lost Calvin, I don't think is necessarily
right.
True. So somebody is going to be a producer there. Obviously, Golden Tate, I think, is going to have the most targets, but there are a lot of targets to now go to whoever the next guy in the offense is going to be. And I'm just, I want to have shares of both of those guys. I don't think Ebron's a very good talent. I think he's kind of actually bad, similar to Fleener. But I think
yeah, he is.
yeah, I mean, he can't really catch all that well, but the opportunity's there, so I'm always buying opportunity, and so he's one of those.
Right. Now let me say this too about Calvin, because I agree with you that he dropped off, but he still commanded,
yes.
sometimes two, defensive backs, sometimes 3, and that takes that away, and that's going to shift probably to Golden Tate. So that's something to think about as well.
Yep, I'm with you there.
All right, next tight end we have Dwayne Allen, who Rummy already insulted. He's very injury prone, which is true. I do think he's more talented than maybe Rummy. He's a great blocking tight end. He's had stretches where he was elite in the red zone. In 2014, he ranked 5th among all tight ends in fantasy points per route run, 2nd in fantasy points per target. That season, he caught 20% of the team's receiving touchdowns, despite accounting for just 7.6% of the overall target market share. Yeah, I think there's a very, very good chance that he exceeds his ADP value, but mostly because I think he's going to get a lot of touchdowns. T.Y. Hilton isn't really an elite red zone option. I don't think Philip Dorsett is either. I think he's probably going to be Andrew Luck's primary target in the red zone. I think that's going to lead to a lot of value in best ball leagues. You already insulted him, Rummy, but what do you think about his ADP?
Insulting him by saying that he's a good player, not a great player. That's an insult, I guess, in today's NFL. No, I do like him, and I think he's somebody that I had a lot of shares of last year. But I think, the reason I had shares of him because of exactly what you're saying now. But I'm just concerned that this is something that may be shifting this year because they went with a lot of 2 tight end, sometimes 3 tight end sets in the red zone last year. And that's going to probably change this year. I think they're going to probably go more big whiteout sets, maybe 2-3 wide receivers. And that's going to sort of shift the look a little bit. So then what happens? We're going to see a lot more of the focus on Allen, I believe. I think, once you have all that film out of Allen being the red zone target, I think the focus will be on Allen. And I think that sucks because now I'm not buying him as much, and I don't think that he's going to be readily available for Andrew Luck. So that's my concern. And I do think, and I've talked about this before, I think in the red zone this year, this is maybe narrative street, so John will appreciate this. This is totally narrative street. The Ryan Kelly edition that they made from Alabama, I think he has a Nick Mangold impact in him. No, seriously, I think that he's going to improve this offense quite a bit. I think that in the red zone, they're going to be able to punch the ball in a little bit more. I think they threw the football a lot more in the red zone previously because they had such terrible blocking up front in the red zone. It made it much, much harder. I think they're going to be able to sort of capitalize a little bit more. You'll probably see a lot of keepers from Andrew Luck, and you'll see a little bit more from the running game in the red zone this year, maybe. And they tend to be an offense that sort of changes a little bit year to year. So seeing them to just go in the red zone and be this tight end heavy, pass heavy offense in the red zone, I think that changes this year. I think they're able to sort of convert a little bit more on the ground. So I'll be looking for that this year. I mean, it may not happen, but I'm kind of shifting away from Allen because of that.
Okay. Well, the next tight end, I'm just going to let you go, Rummy. It's Martellus Bennett.
Listen, I don't have a lot of shares. I mean, I know a lot of people are buying them up right now, but my concern is that, again, without Brady, this is like crapshoot for 4 games. So you're taking out a quarter of the season off the board, and we don't know where those targets are going to. I'd say if it was Brady from the start, then I'd feel a little bit more, comfortable with Bennett. But I don't. I just don't know that he's necessarily going to see an equal share because they feel very, very comfortable throwing the football when Brady's under center. But I don't know how comfortable they'll feel if Jimmy Garoppolo has to start for 4 games, how much they'll actually throw. And that's my concern. Like, where are those targets going to go? So I'm just not as high, but I still think he can catch, 8 to 10 touchdowns easily in that offense. But maybe he's at 70 catches, 600, 700 yards. And it's probably more of an efficient type situation with him, just in the red zone scoring and not necessarily getting a huge catch total. I mean, I feel like he's going to have that Hernandez role, and if in a perfect storm he'll be Hernandez, but it may not happen if the offense doesn't have a full Brady season. It may be a little kind of wishy-washy,
I'm with you. I think he's one of those guys who has. It's like if you can get 500 yards and 5 TDs out of a tight end that you're getting at that point, then he pretty much pays off. But the real question is, like a little narrative street, is how he's going to fit in as a Patriot, because we all know Marty B is kind of like a weird guy.
Yeah. No, I think he's kind of blended in pretty well. I think it helps a lot too if it fits Brady there from the start of the season, because I think he's one of those guys too. He's a lot like, his brother. His brother in Seattle. And this is total narrative street too. If things are going well, they're fine. If they're happy, they're fine, because they're like both very eclectic, outgoing guys. But if things are going wrong, we've seen Michael Bennett like jump the snap in Seattle and like punch dudes in the face and get into fights, and that's my concern with him, because Bennett, when he was with Dallas years ago, one of the reasons he's gone there because he was a little bit of a head case. I think he's matured a lot, but I think as long as things are going well for him, things should be okay. If the Pats start losing and he's not getting targets, then he's one of those guys I could see them just saying, okay, see you later, and they cut him. There's potential there, but I think as long as things are going well, and they should be in New England, he'll be fine.
Okay, so I have a feeling this Power Hour podcast is going to turn into a Power Hour and a Half podcast. But I do know there's also 4 guys we really want to talk about. Next up being Austin Seferian-Jenkins, who was just recently in the news. And following him on Twitter for more than a day makes me want to dump all of my Dynasty shares. But I really, really do love him as a talent. He's a guy I have a lot of MFL10 shares of at the moment, unfortunately. And there's good reason for that. Last season, ASJ was first among tight ends in fantasy points per snap, second in fantasy points per route run, second in yards per route run, fourth in fantasy points per catchable target, and tied with Rob Gronkowski for the 3rd highest ADOT at the position. It's a limited sample size for sure, but going back to Jameis Winston's days at Florida State, he's always heavily targeted his tight ends. Over his 2 seasons there, his tight end Nick O'Leary led the ACC in receptions and receiving yards at the position. Obviously, he was just in the news. He got into a fight with his coach. He apparently didn't know what he was doing, and he was excused from the practice field and then made a bunch of yo mama jokes on Twitter. I mean, that's totally worrisome with Cameron Brate being in the news as a guy the management loves. But at the same time, if he didn't know what he was doing in his second year and then he still was that effective last season, this is a really awesome athletic talent we have. I think maybe, or I want to hope that this is just them trying to knock some sense into him. Hey, we expect this really monstrous role for you. We want you to act the part. I don't really know. I do think he's super talented, and I think as a 16th tight end off the board, I think the risk is okay there. What do you think, Rummy?
Well, I'm going to pass on this one because I have zero shares of him, so I'll let John take this one.
All right, Johnny.
I think I'm like, occasionally I'm going to click him when nobody else wants him, but that shit was terrifying, dude. You just like walk off a practice field, your coach like tells you to go home, then you go on, you start like fighting with random people on Twitter. He just seems like a total maniac, and especially with a team that's kind of like young and up and coming with some new people in the organization, like I don't know if they want to put up with his bullshit, and it seems like he's full of it. Like that was like such a meltdown. That's just terrifying for NFL players.
I know the immediate like response from everybody's like, "It's gonna be a Patriot, bro. It's gonna totally be a Patriot." And like their GM was like, he was brought up in the Patriot system. There's no fucking way that dude's a Patriot. It's like, if he's doing that shit, walking off the field, then there's no way Belichick wants any piece of that shit.
Nope.
So.
All right, well, next up is a guy I have 0 shares of, but Rummy likes a lot. Jimmy Graham as the tight ends.
I know. You know, it's funny, man. Like, maybe I'm too much of a believer that people are so down on him. Because look where we're talking about him now. I mean, he's being drafted so low, and last year he obviously, didn't produce like he should have. He got hurt, and he's still dealing with an injury that is historically not the greatest injury for people to recover from, teletendon injury. So, yeah, I don't have a ton of shares, but I have a couple of shares of him because he's just going so fucking late. And I want some piece of that. If he's healthy and he's out there on the field, he looks good. I mean, you're getting him at a discount now. If he starts to look really good come July, August, everybody's going to be pushing him up their board. So, and I sense that happening just based on who he was at one time. I think that happens. And I'm okay with getting him as my, in this case, as my third tight end. I'm fine with having Jimmy Graham as my third tight end.
So, it's not just to me that the patellar injury, which is huge, I think, but it's also that he wasn't good when he was healthy with Seattle. So I'm just completely laying off. I think the team is way better without him. Doug Baldwin was the elite red zone target that they wanted Jimmy Graham to be.
Right.
I'm gonna pass this over to Dr. John Proctor, Esquire. What do you think about the patellar injury?
I mean, it's an injury that we've always generally avoided, but he has been. You look at Victor Cruz, like he didn't make it back. So I think it's kind of scary, especially for someone built like Graham. So I'm avoiding not only because of the injury, but I kind of have the same sentiment as you, Scott. He just wasn't very good. He didn't really seem to click with Wilson. Wilson seems to be like an improviser, and I don't know if that has ever really been part of Graham's game. He's been more of a guy that you just kind of throw it to who's not even open, and it doesn't seem like Wilson really does that. He seems to wait till guys get open.
He'll be a Patriot pretty soon anyway, so don't worry about it. That's where they all go. They all go to New England.
All right, next tight end off the board is Jason Witten at tight end 18, which is a pick, if you made it, that is defying history. So Witten is 34 years old. In terms of yards per route run, he's declined every year since 2007. That's really bad. I tweeted that like 2 days ago. But still, his yards per route run of 1.39 last season topped much younger tight ends like Eric Ebron, Martellus Bennett, Jordan Cameron, Julius Thomas, and Kobe Fleener last season. He finished as the tight end 12 last year, catching passes from guys like Brandon Weeden and Matt Castle on a 4-12 Dallas Cowboys team. And the last time he failed to finish as a tight end 1 was 12 seasons ago as a rookie. That was also the last time he's ever missed a game. What do you guys think about Witten as tight end 18? Old, reliable.
I'm fine with him. I mean, at that point, again, he's you're talking about, that's an outlier type of a situation that where he potentially could not produce because of history. But again, we're talking mostly tight end 2-3 here. So if you're getting him at that point, then I'm taking him every time. I mean, he's still a guy that's going to be essentially the second target in that offense. So the second trusted target in that offense, and they actually have a running game that they can really rely on. So I'm still taking shares. I mean, if people want to pass on him, then I'll take him as my tight end 2-3. That's fine.
All right, well, next up we have another one of my favorite sleepers. We have Zacharias Miller as the 19th tight end off the board, which is crazy because he finished as the number 16 fantasy tight end last season, despite only leading his team in tight end snaps in 6 games. Over his final 8 games of the season, he led all tight ends in missed tackles forced with 11. He was 4th in yards after the catch. He scored the 5th most fantasy points, and he graded out as PFF's number 1 tight end via the pass. However, this may also be more of a testament for Adam Gase, who is now with Miami, than it is Miller. But he did have a really effective season last year. Rummy, are you taking him at his ADP, or are you avoiding him?
No, I'm taking him. I mean, I think that people are freaking out because Kevin White's, going to be back from injury, and people think that, and I love Kevin White. He was like my number 1 wide receiver that year that he came out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's something to be said for when everybody jumps at a guy that's coming back from an injury and they believe he's going to have a lion's share of targets in the offense. You kind of have to pivot sometimes, and there's an opportunity there. Bennett's gone now. He's gonna see the lion's share of red zone targets outside of Alshon, I believe. White's gonna still have to develop in the system. Have to really a year behind him where he wasn't healthy. He has to really come up to speed and work through some of that stuff early on. So, Miller's gonna have those high highs, and I think that's kind of what you look for in MFL. So. He's gonna be the guy that potentially could have a touchdown or 2 in some games. So I'm buying him, especially at that ADP.
Yeah, I'm in. I can't buy Kevin White at his ADP. He's never played an NFL snap, but
yeah, he's what, like 6th round now or 5th round?
He's like 4th or 5th round. It's just not
really that high already. Wow. Yeah.
I'm just now starting to buy Miller. I just got a couple shares this week. So I'm totally fine with him as a tight end too. Like I said, if you get 500 yards and 4 or 5 TDs out of him, then he easily pays off his price, and I think that's doable even as the 3rd target if Kevin White's the 2nd target.
All right, you want to talk about our last tight end for today at tight end 20 overall, Charles Clay. Rummy, you want to take this?
I love me some Clay. Mama called him Clay. I'm gonna call him Clay. Yeah, I love Charles Clay. I mean, he's a guy that's like the perfect tight end 3. You're getting him so late. When you think of the Sammy Watkins injury, you think of the targets that are going to be the most reliable. For Ty God, I think that Clay is that guy that I want to own the most, really, in that offense. I think just at that value, I'm taking him every time, and he's handily become my tight end 3. I'm almost say 65% of my MFL10. So yeah, I'm taking him every time he's there. He's an auto click, as John would say, kind of like Eifert in the 8th round,
Yeah, I'm with you on Clay. I don't have a whole lot of shares because I generally have 2. I'm generally grabbing 2 tight ends in that 8 to 10 range, and then not getting a 3rd one.
Okay. When
I do take a 3rd tight end, or if I kind of miss, Clay is a guy I'm happy to end up with.
I will say this though about tight ends, guys, just as a basically my strategy this year. I thought last year there were some top-heavy guys at the in terms of that sort of carried me a little bit. I don't know if that's going to happen this year. I don't know why. I have nothing to base that on. I think it's going to be more of a linear year for tight ends. So I'm trying to look at the leagues that I was successful in last year, and I had a lot of guys who were in that 40 to 60 range in terms of points. And if you look at guys like Gates, we just talked about, Witten, Clay, you get those guys in that range, then I'm happy to have sort of a trifecta of those guys than trying to overshoot and get Reed and Gronk with the potential that they flatten out and they don't really meet the return on investment.
I actually just wanted to talk about one more tight end situation for today. One of our listeners, Wispy the Kid, just tweeted out at us saying we were throwing some major shine on Dwayne Allen. I don't think me and Johnny were. I think Rummy was a little bit. But then he also mentioned that he thinks Will Tye is going to be a season saver for him. But I hate to break it to him. Dan Graziano recently said that he thinks Larry Donnell is going to be the favorite to start. Will Tye honestly might be the better talent, but I do think that's the case. I think he has an uphill battle to climb. Probably the third best blocker on the team in terms of tight ends, and I think Donnell is probably the favorite to start. Anything to add on the Giants situation?
No, I don't want any part of the tight end situation there. I think that Eli's not afraid to throw to a young wide receiver. I think Shepard's gonna pick up that number 2 role, and I'm not feeling the tight ends at all. I think that's kind of a wasteland. So let somebody else fight over the scraps.
Yeah, as you said earlier, I think the Giants are happy to throw shit at the wall when it comes to tight end and just not really care.
I'm actually getting another tweet. What do you guys think about Jordan Cameron and the Adam Gase situation in Miami? Everyone knows that Adam Gase heavily targets his tight ends. They averaged more than 12 touchdowns per season, or Adam Gase tight ends have averaged more than 12 touchdowns per season. Miami had just 6 from their tight ends last year, but since Week 5 of 2013, in 37 games, Jordan Cameron has scored more than 12 PPR fantasy points in a game just 4 times. I'm completely fading, despite how attractive Adam Gase's arrival is. I mean, Duarte's there. They got Deion Sims. What are you doing about the tight end situation in Miami, Rummy?
I'm with you, man. I'm fading it. I actually really kind of fading the whole situation in Miami. I haven't really had a lot of shares of that passing offense. It feels like it's something that's going to work itself out. And like trying to buy early right now is probably going to be futile. It's like you're going to be throwing, X amount of darts at that offense. If you have too many shares, then you're probably missing out on other offenses that are a little bit more stable. And I don't really want to buy into something that I feel like is still going to be working itself out mid-season. It feels like it's a work in progress. And I don't believe in Tannehill that much. I think he's, somebody that's just not that good of a football player, honestly.
Yeah, I think the only thing attractive about Jordan Cameron is probably him.
Yeah, he's a good-looking man. He doesn't rock the side part like you, though, John. You got the lettuce, man. You're looking good, kid.
Jordan Cameron's sister is pretty attractive too, by the way.
Is she? Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's like a WNBA player or something. I don't know.
Well, really? So she can post you up. Nice.
Well, so what a way to go out, guys. I want to thank Rumford Johnny for joining us today. It was a pleasure. Honestly, one of our best podcasts yet. You could find him again, some of his old articles at Bro Jackson. You could find him at Draft Consultants, Inc. He's doing the Pros versus Joes draft coming up. I also keep forgetting to do this, but like it means a lot to Johnny that you guys subscribe and download and rate our podcast. Like, he gets so excited when someone rates says like, "Oh, it was really good. Oh, Scott's really handsome and funny and totally steals the show every single podcast." So yeah, like, please, definitely means a lot to us if you subscribe, rate, all that stuff. We'll do a contest or something. I think we'll have all the guys that we've interviewed on for a special Power Hour podcast, MFL10. So if you want to like get involved in that, definitely give us a subscription or tweet us out or something. Again, Rummy, thanks so much for coming on.
No, this was a lot of fun. Again, I'm going to be retiring from the podcast game, so this was my way out, man. I just wanted to like do one last blast with you guys, and who knows? You might be able to drag me back in like Roddy Piper. You hear the fucking bagpipes? I might come down there and start causing trouble and shit. But
Rummy said this to me a few days ago, and I was like, "There's absolutely no way I'm gonna be like the 2014 Bills. I'm gonna find you pistachioed in some dark dungeon bar, and I'm gonna drag you out of nowhere and be like, "Hey, you're coming on this podcast."
All right. Well, that might happen in the during the especially the DFS season. That might actually occur, but I might have to come in like under. I might have to do like an impression of somebody else and like pretend to be them just so I could stay low key, off the grid basically. So we'll see.
All right, you're Kyle Orton and I'm Doug Marrone. But I think actually a perfect way to go out is to get you to do one of your famous impressions, and we'll sign off.
Oh, fuck that! So you put me on the spot now. So who do you want to hear, man? I mean, I do people in the industry, so.
I know.
I do Rotopat, which I know he hates, but.
He sounds like Charlie from It's Always Sunny.
Rotopat sounds like he does kind of sound like that. I don't know, but basically, I don't know. That's a Rotopat. He sounds like Charlie from It's Always Sunny.
All right, can we get one Jeff Tucker? Can we get one Jeff Tucker?
Who?
Oh, so not Jeff Tucker. Evan Silva, Fantasy Feast. What's his name? Jeff.
Oh, Ross Tucker.
Ross Tucker. Sorry.
Who's Jeff Tucker? I don't even know who that is. Welcome to the Fantasy Feast podcast. Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Fantasy Feast podcast. It's the one on the fucking Dude Fantasy Bro and whatever Super Duper Man podcast. I don't even know what you guys call it. But it's a fucking awesome podcast, guys. Oh, he swore. Ross Tucker never swears. Yeah. That's how
Rummy, that was awesome.
We'll go out, man. That's how we'll go out.
That was
All
good.
right, take care, guys. Hope you had fun. Rummy, that was awesome.
Yeah, download this fucking podcast. These guys carrying the torch, man. Again, they want to be around it for at least a season, like Rummy and Ray. So keep them afloat. All right. All right.
Thanks, man. Thanks, guys.